Welcome back to the KAHI Afternoon News. Good afternoon, AM Casey Freela. Pleased to be joined by Congressman Tom McClintock for our weekly conversation. Tom, I was just getting the interview ready and talking with your aides, and they said that you were just on the floor working on a debate on amnesty to illegal aliens. Well, speaking against it, could you tell us a little bit more about that as we get started here?
Well, this is a push by the Democrats to grant a blanket amnesty to about 2.5 million illegal immigrants in this country. And, of course, this debate's going on a day when our southern border is literally collapsing. The Border Patrol's warning us that before the end of the year, they expect to apprehend over 1 million illegal immigrants crossing our borders. That is the combined population of Sacramento plus Atlanta. And they'll have to release them into the interior because of the mockery that they're making of our asylum laws. People need to understand that this is the agenda of the Democrats: open borders. And even though they might deny it, they have long advocated for free health care, free legal counsel, free education, free food, free housing for illegals, all paid by American taxpayers. And you can't credibly say you oppose illegal immigration while you're heaping rewards on every person who illegally immigrates.
And another point on this, I'm glad you're mentioning it because I'm a news guy. I'm trying to find stories to talk about on the news today. There's not a mention of this, that number that you brought up, 1 million. You can find plenty of stories about, the horror being done to detainees down there, but there's not any mention about kind of the brevity of this. Is why I'm glad we're able to talk about it a little bit more.
It's now well over 100,000 apprehensions a month. And understand, these are the illegal immigrants who are illegally crossing our borders who are apprehended by Border Patrol. It doesn't include all of the ones that are evading Border Patrol. And the rule of thumb is that for every one we catch, 2 or more escape into the interior, and of the 1 million that we catch, because of the mockery they're making of our asylum laws, we have to release them into the interior. They're given a court date to show up, and more than 90% of them never do.
Do you think, obviously now the Senate still is controlled by Republicans, and, there's obviously two parts to everything getting passed, but what is the future of bills like this? Because it is being brought up by Democrats on it seems like basically a weekly basis. Whenever you guys aren't in recess, this is what they want to talk about rather than other tangible things to kind of get our country in order, whether it's the economy or things like that.
Well, as I just said on the House floor, this is not legislating. This is farce, because you're precisely right. This bill will stop dead in the Senate because of the partisan, one-sided approach that it takes. And here's the tragedy. There are hundreds of thousands of children who were brought here illegally. In effect, they're stranded here without a country. They've got no legal status here. They have few memories of their native country. And there's broad support in both parties to remedy this situation. But the problem is we can't do that until we first fully secure our borders and fully enforce our immigration laws. Otherwise, we're simply going to encourage more children to be brought here illegally and producing yet another generation who are going to come to us in a few years with the same tragic stories and same demands that we hear today. So if we had addressed both issues in this bill, it would become law within a matter of days. The Senate would pass it, the President would sign it. Full funding of the border wall, reform of our asylum laws, combined with legalizing the status of children who were brought here and raised here through no fault of their own. That bill could become law in a matter of days. And instead of pursuing that balanced approach, the open borders Democrats have simply put through this amnesty bill that will stop dead the moment it leaves the House.
We're visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. I was reading about your no vote on the disaster relief bill, and part of that, let me ask you this, was part of that because it omitted border security funds, as President Trump had hoped would be included in that?
Well, that's one of the reasons, but the principal reason is it's not for disaster relief. 30% of it's for emergency disaster relief. The other 70% is loaded up with pork barrel projects in fact, only 14% of this bill was actually requested by the administration. So instead of using disaster funds for emergency disaster relief as they're intended, it includes $2.5 billion for the scandal-plagued Community Development Block Grant Program. That's the program that funded a few years ago doggy daycare centers and a day at the circus for an entire town. It extends the flood insurance subsidies without any reform. It is a grab bag of political pork projects and very little of it being used for actual disaster relief. And it is so frustrating because the 30% there is for emergency disaster relief, but we can't afford to add 70% on top of that just for pork barrel spending.
And Californians have got to be a little outraged by this because we desperately need some disaster. We've had a bunch of disasters take place here over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and the irony is, by taking money out of the disaster relief fund to plus up the Community Development Block Grant Program for more doggy daycare centers, we end up speeding up the drawdown of the appropriations that we've already made for the disaster relief fund. So when we're struck by the next disaster, that fund will be depleted because we paid for doggy daycare centers as part of the last so-called disaster relief bill. It's frustrating.
I want to talk about also another no vote on the temporary assistance for needy families programs, which sounds good on paper when you read the title of that, but when you dig a little bit deeper, as I was looking on your website, it's kind of disturbing the amount of people in this country that probably should be out looking for work and don't want to look for work and maybe don't fit the exact quote needy family mantra.
Well, that's exactly what the old food stamp program was, and we reformed that in 1996. Bill Clinton signed the Welfare Reform Act that year, which provided for strict work requirements. We said, look, we'll provide you with food stamps, but if you're able-bodied, we expect you to be looking for work, and if a job is offered to you, we expect you to accept that job. And guess what happened? When that law went into effect, the welfare rolls plunged, employment skyrocketed, people got off of welfare and into jobs that led to promotions and promotions after that. It got people off the dole. And unfortunately, that welfare reform bill that worked so well has been constantly undermined in the now going on 30 years it's been in law, 25 years anyway it's been in law. And the result is we're seeing many states, in fact 20 of the states have an effective work participation rate of 0. Meaning they're not engaging any families in work or work preparation on the TANF program. So we've got to get that program back to its fundamental principle, and that is able-bodied people. If you can't, we expect you to be looking for work and to accept a job if one's offered and get off the dole. And we can't continue to extend this program that has lapsed back to the bad old days of the old food stamp program. Not when we're running close to $1 trillion a year in annual deficit.
We're speaking with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Just another thing that I think frustrates people. I was reading this, now I'll say the article is from CNN, saying that the full House of Representatives is expected to vote on June 11th to hold Attorney General William Barr and former White House counsel Don McGahn in contempt of Congress, even as Speaker Pelosi continues to reject calls to go further and impeach President Trump. My point on even bringing that up is, what is the point? I mean, you're there trying to do your job. I can't imagine what it's like for you just going to work on a daily basis when basically they're asking you to distract from what you're trying to get done, pass bills, pass legislation, get laws enacted to help the American citizens, and you have to hear questions and deal with this on a daily basis. I mean, what is it like for you when you go in wanting to do one thing, but they want to spend time tying up your time, which is important, with this other nonsense?
Well, and that's the point. This is the Judiciary Committee. It is ground zero for all immigration issues. And as we just discussed, we're at a moment in our history when when our southern border is simply collapsing. At the same time, we're seeing the violent crime rate starting to inch up. A Judiciary Committee, that's ground zero for those issues. I mean, we can go down a long laundry list of major crises facing this country, and instead of addressing those, they're playing politics with the Mueller report, which clearly could not find after $25 million in 22 months of investigating with the most biased panel of investigators and the most abusive prosecutorial tactics I think we've ever seen. They could not find any evidence of collusion by the Trump campaign with the Russians, and could not make a case for obstruction, because that's what they were supposed to do. Mueller and his gang were supposed to. We paid them $25 million to come up with any case they could on these issues, and they didn't.
Well, I appreciate you commenting on it, because everybody wants to talk about it, but there's nothing to talk about. So there it is.
Yeah.
We've been visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI Radio. Tom, as always, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to visiting again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll take a quick break and be right back here on KAHI.